right, I'm going to hit the PowerPoint and share it with you. Can everyone see that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Good, good. All right. Well, this is the official virtual Firewise Day for the Indian community in Georgetown, Maine. And welcome to everyone. Thank you again for your patience and the change in the schedule. It worked out much better. Although the rainstorm hasn't arrived yet, we did get our brush chipping done in another community yesterday, so that went pretty well. Let's see if I can. So for those, I have a couple of guests that I'm going to introduce in a few minutes, but they're from other states, and I just want to give them an idea where Indian Point is. So it's it's off the coast of Maine. I guess that's considered mid-coast. Here's a zoom in. It's a long peninsula. It really feels like an island to me when you're there, and one way in, one way out. So we'll talk about that a little bit later. This is Reed State Park, this green area. So that's a nice destination that people go to in Phippsburg and actually in Georgetown. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the Firewise program for those who aren't that familiar. There's a couple of requirements that you need to get this status as a Firewise USA site. You need to maintain a Firewise board, and in this case, we use the Indian Point Common Lands Use Committee. You also need to have some type of hazardous fuels mitigation or brush chipping days, as we've been doing for 10 years. And you need some wildfire prevention and education, and that's what we're doing this Firewise Day event today. Just a little bit on the technical side. Each site has to invest the equivalent of 1 volunteer hour per dwelling in wildfire risk reduction actions. Just to do the math real quick, if there was 100 homes in Indian Point, then they would be required to do 100 volunteer hours of brush chipping, Firewise days, meetings like this, stuff like that. And you guys have never had a problem reaching that goal. And right now, I added up the volunteer hours from the brush chipping day we did earlier this summer, and that was 52 hours. So I think you're planning on another brush chipping day in the fall. I think you guys will be all set. So we can talk about that later at the end if you have any questions. So a little bit more about Firewise. It's co-sponsored by the USDA Forest Service, the U.S. Department of the Interior, and the National Association of State Foresters. And we're going to have some folks join us in a minute here. But I wanted to go kind of over the history of Firewise at Indian Point. It started in 2008. We did some wildfire risk assessments in the community. And we worked with Pat Burns and went around to homeowners and looked at the structures and the landscaping and gave them some advice and created a community wildfire protection plan. So that's kind of how it started. And we did our first brush chipping day in 2009. I think we did like 30 tons that day. I think we were there for a couple days. I just remember a huge pile. Now we only have time to do 1 brush chipping day per year with the state, but Bruce Patterson and Chip Bailey have been helping with that over the years, and other volunteers as well. So let's talk just a little bit about the chipping this year. We did about 1 truckload, which was slightly less than average, but it's still good considering that not all the residents were able to come to Indian Point to their seasonal cottages. So we had a lot less people, but we did just about the same amount of work. And we got some help from Bruce's son, Sawyer, since one of our summer interns was actually in a 14-day quarantine preparing to start work. And he joined us 2 weeks after this and has been doing a great job and just about finished with his summer. So that's what we did this year. And then backing up to 2010, that's when Indian Point became Maine's second Firewise community. And now we would call that a Firewise USA site. So at this point, I'd like to introduce a couple of guests that we have on the call here this morning. We want to congratulate Indian Point for their 10th anniversary as a Firewise USA site. And we have Michelle Steinberg here, who is the Director of the Wildfire Division of the NFPA, National Fire Protection Association, and also Megan Fitzgerald McGowan, who's the program coordinator for Firewise. And I'll let you guys come on and say hello. I guess I have to turn this off first. See if that... No, that didn't turn it off, did it? Stop presenting. Okay. Michelle, are you there? Did we lose you? I see you as muted. There you are. I don't hear you. So are we somehow muting you? No? Megan, can you chime in at all, or?
I'm here. Can you
Okay,
hear me?
we can hear you pretty soft, but we're going to have to
talk.
go to Megan for now.
I can talk a little louder. Is
There
that a
you
little
go.
more clear? Can you hear me? All right. Well, hi, I'm Megan. Like Kent said, I am the program coordinator for the Firewise USA program. I live and work in Colorado Springs. I come from a wildfire suppression background. But these days, if you can't get a hold of Kent, I'm your contact at the NFPA. So I can help you with the portal if you're struggling, if your local contact isn't available. I go through and help review applications. If you have friends who live somewhere else who are looking to become a new Firewise site, I'm the final approval once it's gone through the state. And that's kind of what I do with NFPA. I reach out to all of you and listen and participate in these types of calls to hear how are things going. What does it look like where you're at? What are some resources that could help you be more successful, and what can we do to better support you? So that's kind of what we're here to do. We do administer the program nationwide. We work with right now 42 states and have someone like Kent in all the states. And then, it's growing. There's a lot of interest, especially in the West, due to some of the large fires out there. But we still see growth on the East Coast and in the South as well. And, it's not the program for everybody, but it is a great program to help those who want the structure to work on their wildfire mitigation, because we know that wildfires can happen anywhere at any time, and being proactive is the best way to defend against them. So looking at your guys' history, you've been involved for a really long time, and we appreciate that. We have some communities who join, and in a few years they're gone. So the fact that you've been in over 10 years really speaks to you and your organization and your commitment to making your community safer. So thank you for all that you do and for being a part of the program.
Great.
Very good. Let's try Michelle again.
I finally got that mute button to unmute.
Yay.
Hooray. Hi, everybody. So I am not really standing on the steps of the headquarters in Quincy, Massachusetts, but we have nice little backgrounds on Teams, so I thought I'd use one. It's better than my home office. So thank you all for inviting me today. Congratulations on 10 years anniversary officially. We know you've been working for longer than that. And Kent and I go way back.
Yes.
So I've actually been with NFPA since 2002 as the program launched, and it's been just the thrill of my professional career to see it blossom. And Megan is joining us at a point where there's more than 1,700 sites across the United States. She mentioned 42 states, something I couldn't have dreamed of when we had a handful of pilots way back in 2002. And my boss looked at me and said, you think you could take this national? And I said, well, we'll give it a try. So, so here we are. Wonderful work that you've been doing. I'm really looking forward to the rest of the presentation and for your creativity in figuring out how to do this when we can't all be together. I applaud you. So thank you for all you're doing, and congratulations again from NFPA. It is really exciting to see this. Thanks so much, Kent.
You're welcome. I'm so glad you could join us, and we understand if you have to sign off later, but I'm going to try to keep this to, maybe another half an hour. But we're going to go back to the history of the Firewise program and go through some Firewise days that we've done. If I can get back to where I was. Yeah, I'm going to go through these real quick. I think we went through the chipping. All right, so talking about some of the Firewise days we've had in the past. This one was at the Georgetown Fire and Rescue Station, 2014. We had some people come up and talk to us. It's kind of the there's no real downtown Georgetown, but it's kind of the center of where everyone goes to get their mail and get a cup of coffee at the store. Now, I found this Firewise Day in 2016 to be the most interesting because the Georgetown Fire and Rescue does a charity auction every year to raise funds for their volunteer fire department. So they gave me a booth at the auction, and I got to see all this great stuff and meet lots of nice people. And they even gave me about 3 or 4 minutes on the microphone, which I don't know if they do again, but I did talk about Firewise. So that was a good day despite a little bit of rain. And speaking of the auction, I think they did hold it virtually this year over this past weekend. And I went on that site to look around, and they had this wonderful kind of a Airbnb offer to stay at this tree house, and it's called the Sigwin Tree Dwelling, and I'm just wondering if that sold or how much they got for that. Anyone on the call know? Well, anyway,
I know it's sold, but I don't know for how much.
it was like $250 on Thursday, so it probably went up, but it was just, and they have boats and stuff like that. So a little plug for the auction if you guys are ever up that way. So moving on, actually, Indian Point was awarded a Wildfire Community Preparedness Day award in 2019. This is not a picture of them. This is another community, but I never got a picture that year of that. But I think they used it to help with one of the brush chipping days that they did outside of the state. So that worked out really good. So I want to kind of shift gears and talk a little bit about the current fire activity here in Maine for some of those who may have not made it back to Maine or kind of been hearing different things on the news, but it's been a busy year. So far, we've burned about 919 acres, 811 wildfires, and that is most that we've done since about 2001, which is when I started with the Forest Service. We had 980 fires that year, but we're nowhere near the acreage. That year we had 2,220 acres. So we're being at about 900 acres is still much more than our average, which is about 500 fires and 500 acres per year. So we've been pretty busy, and as you know, we had that dry spell in June, and things are still dry right now. I was just talking to Jim before the video call. He said that things are still pretty dry down there. But we keep track of all the fires that occur in Maine, and we investigate all of them and get statistics on them. And years ago, we did a comparison, and we found out that 75% of the wildfires that occur in Maine either destroy, damage, or threaten structures. So that just tells you that we have a lot of what we call the wildland-urban interface in Maine. And we'll talk a little bit about the causes, because we also determine the cause of the fire whenever we can. So this year, the most common cause of wildfires is similar to the past. It's debris burns, which is this top pile here where someone has good intentions of getting rid of some of their brush and they have a debris pile fire. And of course, you need a permit for that. But, I don't think many people burn in Indian Point because we have this chipping program, and also the association is adamant about people being very careful with wildfires. And I think that's one reason why you haven't had many fires down there. Now, the second most popular cause for wildfires is equipment, and that's what this is here. This is a timber harvester that has been overheated and ignited, but that category also includes, chainsaws and brush cutters when it's dry. You accidentally hit a rock, and I'm talking with my hands here. I don't know why no one can see me, but you accidentally hit a rock and it makes a spark, and then that lights the grass on fire. So when it is dry and you're doing yard work with power equipment, please be careful. And this is probably no surprise, but the third most popular category for causes of wildfires this year has been campfires. There's been a lot of staycations in Maine where people might have had vacation time. They were going to travel and they did not travel, so they went hiking and camping instead. And there's been an increase in the carelessness of campfires. So please pass that along if you're doing any camping to make sure the fire is completely out before you leave the area. We talked a little bit about the moderate drought that we're having, and I don't think this rainstorm is going to end it along the coast too much. I mean, you might get a half an inch, but it could be spotty. So this is kind of an outdated, but I did want to mention that it has been a pretty dry summer. So let's go back and start talking about Indian Point. So what are some concerns there? When we did those wildfire risks assessments back in 2008, the average score was in the moderate risk category of wildfire, and that has to do with the access, the type of structures, and the landscaping, just to name a few, and access to water sources. But the key thing was you really are lacking in they don't call it defensible space anymore, but the area between the structures and the forest. That could always be improved on, and that's what we strive for with our brush chipping program. And we also have what we call excessive fuel loading, that buildup of fuels, not just near the structures, but also on the commonly owned properties in the center of the community. And obviously increased response time due to the rural location and narrow roads, and lack of freshwater water sources for fire suppression. You can use salt water in a pinch, but that's assuming the tide's at the right level and you can get to it. So this is kind of a technical thing, but we have a fire triangle that talks about what is needed to have a fire. You need heat, oxygen, and fuel. Well, we have another triangle that has to do with the fire behavior. And so you can see that these three factors are weather, topography, and fuel. Well, you can't really do much about weather or topography, but you can reduce the amount of fuels near your structures. And you guys are doing a good job of it, and I want you to continue with it. So this is a slide that NFPA has on their Firewise website, which is a great resource if you have a chance to go there. Just Google it and you'll get there. But it talks about these different home ignition zones. And a lot of the forest rangers with the Maine Forest Service have attended the home ignition zone course put on by NFPA. I've actually attended it several times and I learn more each time. But they've done a lot of research, and this is science-based information. And there's been a lot of emphasis on what you need to do in these different zones. And the zone within 0 to 5 feet is the immediate zone. And that's when you're mostly concerned about your fine fuels, we call it, the small stuff that's kind of smaller than the size of a pencil or your little finger. Those ignite, those dry pretty rapidly even after a rainstorm, and those could ignite if an ember were to land near those fine fuels. So check around the foundations of your structures for that kind of stuff and sweep it up, or replace any kind of mulch near your homes with rocks or something that can't burn. And then you have the intermediate zone, which is 5 to 30 feet, which more commonly we refer to as defensible space. That's an area that you need to manage your vegetation, but you don't have to cut every tree. I mean, you don't have beautiful property along the coast of Maine to live in a parking lot. You want to enjoy those trees, but you just want to make sure that they're not making a connection to the forested areas. So break up your fuels, so to speak. Have little islands or pockets of trees and shrubs, so if there is a surface fire, it doesn't carry through to your structure. And the extended zone, of course, is 30 to 100 feet. And I don't know too many of the properties in Indian Point that have 100 feet, other than maybe towards the shoreline, which should not be a problem for fire. And just, I always like to have a little disclaimer here about cutting and maintaining vegetation within the shoreland zone, which is 75 feet. Our recommendations do not overrule the Department of Environmental Protection's laws about cutting vegetation. So if you have any questions about what you can or can't cut, you check with your local code enforcement officer. In general, they want to keep the areas near the water shaded. So you won't probably be getting permission to cut any large trees unless they're proven to be diseased or a threat somehow to a structure. So I'm going to go through a couple slides here that show some examples of these different zones that I was talking about in that graphic. This is within 0 to 5 feet, and you can see on the right-hand picture you've got a spruce here, a softwood tree, which has a lot of resins in the bark, so they tend to ignite a lot easier than hardwood trees. And this is right next to some cedar shingle siding, which probably would light pretty easily if you had a fire down in here. So I don't know if this is right near the shore, but you could probably limb this tree and reduce the risk of a fire right in this area. And then in the upper left-hand corner, there's some property that has some stones along it. It's probably done for landscaping or whatever, but that's a great deterrent to surface fire. And then this bottom one here shows a little bit of flowers and succulent type vegetation, and those aren't so much of a risk for a wildfire, but there's still rocks around here, so that's kind of a good trade-off in that one. And then this picture to the left shows a structure, and I'm not sure this was actually in Indian Point, so you might not recognize this, but you can see that there's a lot of hardwoods, leaf litter underneath this deck. So if you have a surface fire coming up through here, it would burn underneath the deck and probably ignite that deck. So that's something to be concerned with. Whereas the photo on the right-hand side, you have a kind of a stone, not really a patio, but they've got stones down here and an area to sit. And you can see the foundation is exposed, so there's a gap there before this cedar shingle it doesn't hit the ground. Now this picture was taken in the fall, so there's a few leaves there, but the one on the right is a much safer situation. Now here we're expanding on that zone, and now we're in the intermediate zone, which is 5 feet to 30 feet. And this is actually on a slope. So you've got a lot of brush here that had been cut and just left. And if you had an ignition source below this property and a fire started down the left-hand side of the screen, the surface fire would probably preheat as it goes, and it would increase speed as it goes up towards the structure. So this is a pretty dangerous situation here. And I think, if I remember, this might have been in Booth Bay, and I think there was a road below here that was on the water, and then a structure, and then this is kind of on the hill overlooking the ocean. So if any of the structures below it happen to ignite, it would easily carry up and ignite this. So that's kind of a watch out situation there. One thing I always like to talk about is ladder fuels, because you can trim the trees within the shoreland zone. You can prune them. You always have to leave a third or more of the crown, but you can prune them, and that also reduces the risk of a surface fire getting up into the crowns and torching and possibly igniting the structure. So that's a short definition of ladder fuels. And I think that graphic's a little blurry, or I need a new prescription with my glasses, but you get the general idea. Another thing that we look at when we do the wildfire risk assessments is the type of building materials and whether there's leaf litter. You can see in this picture to the right, there's a buildup of leaf litter and also overhanging softwood branches. Very dangerous if a structure fire or woods fire is throwing embers up into the air. Some of these embers have been known to travel like 3/4 of a mile, so you might not be safe if the fire's far away. Depends which way the wind's blowing, but if you can remove those leaves and needles once or twice a year, and definitely before you go back to your other residence, that would be a good idea. So a couple words about removing brush and trees, and I don't remember where this was taken. It probably was in the common area, but over the last 10 years, there's been a lot of work done on the outer edge along the road of the common areas, and I think that's been a good deterrent of wildfires, because you have cars walking by, hopefully not too many people smoking and discarding their cigarettes, but we have fires that are caused by people who may pull over suddenly to answer their phone or deal with a child or something. And as the car is idling, the catalytic converter underneath gets so hot, it might ignite the grass, and they might not even know. When they drive off, they don't even look in the rear mirror and see any fire, and it could ignite. So hats off to those who have been working hard all these years to kind of, first year we went like 5 or 10 feet in, and then the next year maybe 15, 20 feet in, and trying to pick up that fine fuels, the smaller stuff. Now in this picture you see softwood that's kind of springing back. We call that regeneration. That's starting to grow again. But this spruce was cut down and probably too big for the chipper, and it was just left there to decompose. And I know that doesn't look all that great, but that's really not going to carry a surface fire. They've done studies, and we know that it takes a long time for the moisture to dry out in these larger fuels. We call them 1,000-hour fuels. That's how long it would normally take for this to be dry enough to burn. So we're more concerned about this small stuff, smaller than the size of your wrist, and especially the softwood and some of this dry stuff, dead stuff. So that's what you need to continue to work on in your properties and in the common area.
Ken, I have a question on that.
Sure.
If you go back to that slide.
Does it go backwards?
So,
yes.
I mean, to me, that's a great photo, but one of the things that I'd like to get from you and other experts here is the situation that we're dealing with that doesn't quite look like this, and frankly, it's on the topic of thinning spruce, in particular softwoods, where we have a lot of spruce that started out as saplings, 2 and 4 inches apart from each other, that are now 2, 4, 6, 8 feet high, very, very dense along the common lands, whether that's Loop Road or Little River Road, within the shoulder of the road and 30 feet in. And so one of the things that I'd like to get some sense of from you and others about that defensible space, and per our fire safety plan, the roads serving as fire breaks and up to 30 feet in, and we're committed to prioritizing low, moderate, high, and marking those trees, saplings. But from my opinion, I think we can do better in a lot of areas where we have very, very thick spruce that is, doesn't look like this photo, and in my mind, perhaps presents an issue that needs to be dealt with. So I don't know if you want to address that at the back end, or I was hoping at some point during this we could talk about that.
Yeah, let's talk about it now. We call those spruce, those dense spruce stands of regen, less than 10 feet high or so. We call them dog hair thickets. I mean, you would have trouble walking through it if you had to. So we do recommend that they be thinned out, and it's a lot easier to deal with those small spruce saplings when they're small rather than 20, 30 years from now when they're large. It can get very expensive and dangerous to drop those big trees, and there's a limited market for large trees in that area. And I know you didn't mention a timber harvest, but that's something that we could talk about maybe later. But just along the edges, if you could reduce the amount of softwood thickets, I think it would be very helpful. And you wouldn't really change much the appearance of the wildness. I think it's still going to look pretty nice in there. I know some people enjoy walking their dogs in that area, and so I think you're on the right track. I think if we can spend a little more energy on trimming some of those, and I know that our seasonal interns, they do each have a brush cutting saw, and we would allow a day's worth of work on common areas if everyone approved that. So that's something we could talk about in the future. That would be outside of the brush chipping day. We could kind of make it a brush cutting day and only cut a limited amount within a certain distance, and then the next day or the next week come back and chip that up. So it's something to think about in the future.
Thank you.
All right, we'll press on here. So let's talk about Firewise plans for the future. We certainly want to continue to maintain the status as a Firewise USA site and continue the brush chipping days. One thing I'd like to do a few more of is we can continue to do these wildfire risk assessments. I did 7 of them last year, and those we kind of had a few volunteers or people that wanted to have their homes done, and that's fine. But I also like to do them randomly, if that works out. That way, there's no bias. Like, well, this one's a good one, I'll pick that one, or this one's not so good, I'll pick that one. So we can try to do that probably next year, try to do a few each year. And we also want to continue the Firewise Day events. I know last year we did an event at the Georgetown Working League Fair, which probably is canceled this year. But, I like different venues. We reach different groups. Even today, we're reaching some new folks. So those are things to think about. And Kathleen, we've had some emails about the renewal due for the Firewise will be coming up on November 20th. So there's still a little time to do that, but they do encourage putting stuff in advance. You don't have to wait till the last minute. So so that's kind of the end of the presentation here. I wanted to see. I don't know when this was taken. Is that sign still up there? The Indian Point sign? I think it is.
The Indian Point sign is. It doesn't say private property anymore.
Okay.
But I did replace, someone had hit that Firewise sign behind it, so I put up a new one there. That's the one that got a bullet hole within a week.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you everyone for listening, and we'll open it up for some questions. I know Bruce had a good one, but anything else we can help you with? I wanted to thank Kathleen for sending some pictures. This one I got off the Facebook page. It's a beautiful sunset, or maybe it's a sunrise. I don't know. It's funny. I don't spend a lot of time in your community other than the brush chipping. So once in a while I've had lunch on the beach, and it is just a gorgeous place. I think you guys are very fortunate to have property there and have a active association. So I'm excited about continuing with the Firewise program, and we do have the local forest ranger on today, Dan Welsh. Do you want to say hi, Dan, or can you unmute?
Sure, yeah, I'm here.
Yeah.
Congratulations, guys, on 10 years. That's quite the milestone, and hopefully you guys keep working at it and can continue for another 10 years and continue working to maybe grow the community a little bit bigger for people helping out, and hopefully meet you guys someday.
Thanks, Dan. Appreciate it. So I think that's all we have
This is
today.
Kathleen.
Like I said, we are going to record this, and I'll try to send out a link for those that missed it, and maybe you can put it on your association Facebook page or wherever you send out emails, and then people can check it out. Anything else before we call it complete?
Kent, I have a question. This is Kathleen. First of all,
Sure.
thank you for doing this great presentation.
You're welcome.
But I'm curious about what you were saying about these dog hair stands, I guess you called them, or thickets.
Thickets, yeah.
So is there anything that restricts us over time moving deeper in to do things? Just thinking that that would maybe create even more of a barrier, and also potentially save some of the hardwoods that are starting to look a lot like Dr. Seuss trees because the spruce are stealing the sun.
Oh, yeah. Well, there certainly is some potential for some forest management there on the common property. And I am a forester, but my role here with the Forest Service is fire prevention. But we could have one of our district foresters come out and kind of do a walk and talk with some of the community leaders and talk about some options. Now, the district foresters, they have nothing to do with setting up timber harvests. They're just there to advise. So I think it would be a comfortable situation where there's no obligation and no cost. And I could try to maybe have one of them contact you. But I'll just say a few things about what I see looking in from the outside is you want to avoid having a single age stand, and probably what happened with that property was it was probably clear cut 100 or 120 years ago, and it all kind of grew back at once. So you want a healthy, resilient forest has different age classes and different species. You're still going to have some softwood, some hardwood, and different types of trees. Just like communities, you want a diverse community. So that's one thing that a timber harvest does allow, is it can be done in such a way that it selectively cuts certain trees and kind of grooms your forest so it will be longer lasting, more healthy, and somewhat more resistant to wildfire. So that would be your goals there, and I think they're achievable. And nowadays, if you were to consider a timber harvest, they could actually put a blue spot on each tree that they would be considering harvesting. And before they even bring a piece of equipment on the property, people could look at it and go, okay, imagine if that tree with the blue dot's gone, how is this going to look? It gives you more of a visual of, okay, this is what we're going for, and this is how it's going to look when it's done. So it's a lot more assuring that you get the objectives that you desire. So hopefully that helps, but let me know, and I can, I think there's a new district forester for the area that I think she would probably be very interested in seeing the property down there. So if you guys are interested, I'll get in touch with her.
Thank you.
All right. Well, I think we did pretty good. We're we're less than 45 minutes here, and I'll let you guys get back to your day. Thank you for your time this morning, and continue to be safe with your coworkers and families, and we'll see you soon.
Kent,
Yes.
thank you very much. This has been very informative and very helpful. I appreciate it. But
You're welcome.
going back to your other question, your first question about the treehouse, I looked it up and
Okay.
it's valued at $350 and it's sold for $375. So there's your answer.
Yeah. Thank you for checking that out. I hope the auction went well.
I hope so too. I don't know if they met their goal, but they did
Yeah.
quite well.
Yeah, these are different times, so.
Yes, indeed. But thank you.
Okay, thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Kent.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, Kent.
See ya.
Thank you, Ken.
Thank you for the opportunity to say hello.
All right, you're welcome.
Thank you, Megan. Thank you,
Thank
Megan.
you, Megan. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you,
Have a
Ken.
good day, everyone.
Have a good day.